When you find your deer on the side of the road, first thing to do is check how fresh it is. Best way to check is just smell. If it smells like rotting meat, don't eat it. If it smells like poop, then you might be able to eat it still. But if it smells like rotten meat, don't touch it, just leave it there. Another good check is to look at the eyes. So when I pulled over on my bicycle a little while ago, this deer still had eyes that were clear. It looked like normal deer eyes, but you can tell now that those eyes are kind of clouded over. That means that that deer was super fresh when I first saw it, and now it's a bit older. Also, rigor mortis is a great way to check. So if your deer is stiff as a rock like this deer is, that means it's still pretty fresh. They lose rigor mortis after about, 4 to 6 hours or so. And so if you've got a stiff deer, that's a good sign. It does make it harder to get into the car. If you know your deer is super fresh and it doesn't have rigor mortis, that means you got it fresh enough that it hasn't even set in yet. That's a really good deer to get. This deer, however, is still going to be pretty tasty, I bet, despite having sat in the sun here for maybe, I bet you an hour and a half, 2 hours. Getting it to your car, of course, can be kind of tricky. You want to make sure that you're dragging it. You're not going to lift it because that's going to be hard on your back. And then when you get it to the car, it's a good idea to be prepared to get your clothes dirty, to lift it up there into the car, unless you've got a couple of friends to help you. Then you might be able to do it without getting yourself too dirty. Another really good indication that this is a fresh deer is that the blood on the ear here is still bright red. It's actually starting to clot now. It's been sitting out for a while, but it was fresh, flowing blood when I first saw it, which means that's a very fresh deer. Blood on the head is also a good sign because it means it might be a head kill. And so it's possible that your guts haven't been exploded yet, and that's going to make it a much easier clean. You might even be able to use the rib meat. Any gut spilled deer, of course, you're probably not going to use that rib meat. It's going to taste awful. You're going to stick with the legs and the back strap. So that's what you do when you grab your first deer. The clot there, you're also seeing some of that clear liquid. That's brain fluid coming out. If you've ever taken a first aid course, you know, keep an eye out for that. Apparently it tastes like bananas, but don't taste it. You also notice that this is not a doe. This time of year in the spring, we get mostly does out here because they're pregnant and they're not thinking right and they get hit. But this one's actually a buck, which means you'll have a lot of meat on this deer. The meat will taste a little gamier, but if you brine it the way you do all roadkill, it's going to still taste great. Also, if you take a look at the eye now, you can actually see that kind of glazed over look. That means that this deer has been out here for at least an hour or so. But an hour is not bad at all. These are not bad indicators. It just means that your deer has been here at least an hour. And when I first saw it, eye was good, blood was fresh. That means this is a good deer. That's a lot of meat. Whew.
You're lucky.
Heavier than a pregnant one. It's just me.
Lucky. We're a lucky one.
It's a lucky catch. This is the moment you wish you brought a friend.
Okay, Casey, don't hurt your back again. Don't hurt your back again. Oh, this is heavy. Let me this.
Oh, that's all. Do it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to wrap the rope around it. Why do you like roadkill deer so much?
Because it's delicious. Tastes much better than meat from the store. And I like to not waste things. My grandparents survived the Depression by, picking clams and picking apples and things like that. And I feel like it's important to not waste because while we have lots of food right now, there might be a day someday where we don't. And so it's good to not waste the food that we have here. But mostly because it tastes good. I think if I get the head in first, I'll have less blood pouring. And this is where you give the deer a hug, because there's no other way to get it into the car.
Like you love the duck. Like you love the da, da, da. Casey?
But despite the gross factor, you never hurt your back if you're giving the deer a hug. Alright, so once you got your deer in your car, you're going to take it the minimum distance based on your state's regulations away from the road. And it's really important not to process right there on the road because I believe the number is about 80% of roadkill is secondary. So animals are going to come in, try to eat the deer, like an eagle or a raven or a vulture, and they're going to get hit by the car. So it's really important you get it out in the woods. And also, if you're processing on the side of the road, leaving the guts there, that's not something the state patrol can really easily pick up and throw in the back of their truck and dispose of. And so that's going to make them less likely to allow us to process roadkill legally. And trust me, folks, if you want to process roadkill, you want to do it legally because it's no fun to be running around in the middle of the night trying to do this. So let's all be good citizens and make sure our deer are processed minimum distance from the road. It's also more pleasant out here. There's no cars. We can listen to the birds while we process our deer. It's much nicer, I think. First thing you're going to check is for gut spill. And so we didn't see this when we first got this deer, but we can see that there's gut spill now. And the reason is that right here in the belly area, you can see this kind of almost turquoise color. It's like a greenish color. And so what's happened is when the deer got hit, the intestines, or probably the stomach in this case, because of the green color, got exploded. And that goo, which tastes terrible, makes your meat taste terrible too, has made its way through and is staining the skin. And so what that means is that these ribs, especially the lower ribs, are probably trash. We don't want to eat those. We may be able to eat some of the upper ribs, but what we're going to do, I'm going to do with this deer, is to save us a ton of time, as well as to make sure that we're not getting any nastiness in our meat, is I'm going to do my butchering backwards from normal. So rather than butchering from the stomach like you would a farmed or a hunted animal, I'm going to flip this deer on its belly and butcher from the back. And this is going to speed things up immensely. When I brag about being able to process a deer in under an hour, this is how I do it. If I'm processing a deer any other way, then it's going to take me a lot longer. Also, you'll notice that I've got over here buckets for putting the meat into. I've got two buckets, grade A, grade B, as I like to joke about. I've got two knives. I prefer to have a razor sharp disposable blade knife for cutting the meat and the skin, and then a cheaper but fixed blade knife for doing the ribs or for cutting joints. I use Morikov Bland. It's a great brand. It's so nice and cheap, never breaks. I've also got some paper towels and some bleach for the very end. So that's my setup. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here on the neck. I usually start up at the neck, and I'm going to just split that skin. If you ever used a knife for butchering an animal, you'll know that you don't want to slice like this against the fur. That's going to dull your knife. It's actually much better to make a little incision like I did, and then slice from underneath the fur, and then that way your knife can stay sharp a lot longer. I'm going to try my best just to cut the skin here, not the meat, because if you're cutting the meat, it's going to potentially introduce more contamination to that meat. And if you've got some gut spill, if you're keeping all that fascia intact, you're going to be better able to salvage that gut spill. Of course, no one's perfect. You can see I sliced the meat just a little up there in the neck.
One, started.
Alright, so as I'm pulling back this skin here, you can see we've got some really good looking shoulder meat here and good looking neck meat, but now we're getting into one of the points where the deer got hit. So we'll see there's a lot of blood in there. That bloodshot meat, a lot of hunters will just throw away. You don't got to throw it away though. A couple ways to deal with it. You can grind it and then just let it drip. That's one way. If you're bothered by that smell, ooh, and that is a strong smell, then you can grind it and brine it. You can also slice it and brine it, and that way you still have steaks. That'll actually work pretty good for a lot of these. I always like to smell to make sure I'm not getting any of the gut spill in there. It's kind of hard to tell at this point whether I've got gut spill or not. I don't believe so. It usually turns kind of a green color.
One. Okay, started.
Got a lot of bloodshot in this back part here, so we may or may not be able to use it. You'll know once you get in there. Don't be afraid of a little blood piled up on the flesh itself, on the skin itself, underneath the skin, because a lot of times you'll get that blood just oozing under the skin. Gut spill will do the same. That'll make all your meat taste bad. But don't be afraid of the blood. The blood's not going to hurt nothing, and you can a lot of times just cut out that top layer or scrape it, and then that way you can get rid of that blood and have a lot of really high quality meat. A lot of people think that they're going to harvest a roadkill deer and it's going to look pretty and delicious when they pull it off the road, and it's most likely not going to. You're going to have to do a lot of work in order to get this roadkill to be palatable. That's just how it is. Some people might be really picky and only take that neck meat and call it a day. That's fine. No one's going to object. This is roadkill after all. And as long as you got the whole deer off the road, the state is going to be quite happy with you. That's why they're letting us do this. They want statistics on where the deer are hit, so make sure you get your permit. And they also are really interested in not having deer piling up, rotting on the sides of the road, attracting other animals to get hit by cars and create a nuisance. So that's a great thing. Make sure you get your deer off your road, and if you want to waste that bloodshot meat, by all means, but I don't. I like to use it. A little bit of pressure, if you've never skinned before, is super helpful. So pulling, or tension, I guess. If you pull on that skin, with a little bit of tension, you'll be able to pull the skin off much easier than the rest of the meat.
One. Get started.
Great thing about not using the hide, which we are not using the hide on this one. I do not have time, and it's kind of gnarly, and this time of year in the spring they've got bad hides, is you don't have to be super careful with it. You can just kind of slice right down. It gets time to take the arm meat off, you can just slice right along the arm. You don't have to worry about it at all, which is really great. Don't get caught up in being a perfectionist when you're processing a roadkill deer, because processing a roadkill deer is not an art of perfection, it is an art of good enough. As long as that meat doesn't make anyone sick and tastes reasonably good, you've had a successful day. And if you waste a lot, well, it was all going to get wasted anyway. In Alaska, where I was living the last 5 years and learned a lot of these skills, I want to say thank you, of course, to all of the Yupik people who taught me how to turn gross meat like beaver meat into stuff that tastes good. I use those skills here. And also all the people who took me hunting, helped me process roadkill moose up there. Anyway, in Alaska, you've got more moose are killed by just the railroad, not even the highway, than all of the hunters in the state. Which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Lots of people get upset about hunting, but they don't get upset about being able to drive their car, which is killing a lot of deer. So. Of course, hair is terrible. Hair gets all over everything. You want to do your best not to get hair in there. If you've got a friend, of course, to help you, and you've got a nice big tree, you could tie this deer up like you would when you hunt a deer, and by hanging it, make it a lot easier to keep the hair and other stuff out of the meat. But I won't lie, I don't oftentimes have friends helping me, so this is the best way I have found to process.
One. Okay, started.
So whenever I start cutting the meat, so after I've got the skin most of the way off, or the part of the way off, I'm going to cut the good stuff first, put that into my grade A bucket, and then I'm going to get into the grade B, because maybe this has got some gut spill under there, I just haven't noticed it, and so once I cut in there, it's going to start leaking out. I could get into the good meat. So we start here at the good stuff at the front, and then we'll move back. Looks like while it was a head kill, it was definitely also hit there, primarily hit there in the kind of the side back, lower back. So I'm going to start up here at the top, the neck, avoiding the head because I know there's some brain goo coming out there and we don't want to eat that. Even out here in Washington where there is no mass wasting disease, we still want to avoid it just because we could be the first one. So when you're getting at the back strap, you want to, and you've got a lot of like a layer of goo on there. There's this really thick fascia on top, and so you can kind of peel back that fascia. And if you've got this really sharp knife, like one of the disposable blades, or if you're just really good at sharpening a knife, you can really get in there and get a lot of that goo that kind of builds up when a deer's been hit in the back, away from the back strap, which is awesome. The back strap, is, you may know, have also heard it if you've ever been in a fancy restaurant. It's called filet mignon, and this is the best meat you're going to get off the deer. And I'll use back strap even if it's real bloody. Just grind it up and make a fancy filet mignon burger. So real tasty. That bubbling sound is concerning, because what that means is that there is a goo that is starting to come out. You can see there that there's little tiny pinholes that are forming or have formed already in the gut sac, and so that goo is going to start bubbling out, and so we want to get this meat as quick as we can out of here safely, right? Don't cut yourself, without getting any of that goo on the meat itself. So that's the roadkill plan.